Welcome to the Connors Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. On October 14th, at the Civil War Roundtable, the speaker is going to be Tom Fleming, who ordinarily talks about the Revolutionary War and has written more than 50 books about the Revolutionary War. But he's going to tie in the origins of the Civil War to the time of the Revolution. How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm good, Mike. It's good to talk to you.
Okay, so what are you going to be talking about at the Civil War Roundtable?
The name of my book, Mike, it's a new book, came out in March. It's called The Great Divide, and it's about the conflict between Washington and Jefferson, something that most people are not even aware existed. But by the time Washington retired as president after 8 years, he and Jefferson were really deadly enemies, and they differed on so many issues, particularly about the strong presidency. Jefferson did not believe in a strong presidency. In fact, I think one of the surprises of this book is that when Washington wrote his farewell address, he said that the three things that he hoped Americans would never do is favor a foreign country, to split the Union in any way, shape, or form, and also become antagonistic to different parts of the country just because they're from different parts of the country. He was strongly he felt the Union that was the future of American happiness. Otherwise, America would wind up like Europe, fighting wars between states and so forth. So and that takes us into how Jefferson's antagonism to Washington and his emphasis on the Union it opened the gate to a lot of people thinking maybe they could secede. And the real beginning of it, though, occurred only a few months after the beginning of the Civil War, as I said. We didn't know it was that, of course, at the time. But the trouble started, you might say, when Jefferson was president for only a few months after Washington by this time was dead. And incidentally, Jefferson hated him so much by the time he died that he didn't even go to his funeral. And he was the vice president of the United States at the time. So one of the things on which they violently disagreed was this favoring of a foreign country. Jefferson had a love affair with France right from the start, almost, of the French Revolution. And a diplomat from France came to Jefferson and asked him if it would be all right if Napoleon sent an army to the country we now call Haiti. It was in 1801. It was called Saint-Domingue. That's the French name for what was later the country that became Haiti, and it was a very, very prosperous and valuable sugar colony for the French. But they'd had a revolution, and there was a black leader running it, and Jefferson did not like this at all. And when this diplomat suggested that Napoleon send the army, Jefferson pounded his desk and said, "Yes, by all means, we'll get rid of that black dictator." And the guy was a strong leader, that's true, but he was doing the best he could with the situation that faced him. And but this was a glimpse, I think, of Jefferson's antagonism or lack of faith, really, is a better way to put it, to blacks. He did not think they were capable of governing themselves, and he felt they were somewhat weak mentally and intellectually. So the next thing you know, Napoleon has a 20,000 man army in Saint-Domingue, and he's killing people right. He's not with them. One of his son-in-law was the commanding general, but he's killing people right and left, and it looks like he's going to make this conquest very easily. But what do you think happened? This is one of the surprises. He suddenly realizes, the general in command suddenly realizes that his army is sick. Whole companies rather, suddenly have this strange disease which leaves them almost helpless and vomiting, and the next thing you know, they're dead. And yellow fever is tearing apart the French army. And although Napoleon kept sending in more troops, it was an enormous set of losses that Napoleon just refused to accept. He just didn't accept defeat in general. And pretty soon, he had to accept this, and the French army was a wreck. And they finally pulled out. And what happened then? A black general formed the nation of Haiti. He created a new flag and so forth, and he marched his army across this new country, Haiti, and he killed every white man, woman, and child. It was a glimpse of a fear a realization of a fear that everyone in the South has sensed because they were keeping slaves, and so this fear of a race war became deep in the South's mind and heart from that time on, and then it was reinforced when Nat Turner in 1831 did you might say a pocket version of the terrible slaughter on Haiti when he staged a revolt and he killed every white man and woman and child that he met along the path. He wound up killing about 60 people before they stopped him, and this reinforced the South's dread of this race war. And if Washington had been president, first of all, he never would have allowed Napoleon, whom he knew was no friend of America, to put an army of trained regulars within so close to America. So there it is, that divide between these two men, a different attitude towards France, that the foreign country that Jefferson loved, and Washington, he didn't dislike it. He just felt we should keep it at a distance.
Now, you think Washington could have stopped the French from sending troops to Haiti?
Oh, he would have, definitely. First of all, he wouldn't have. The French were very leery of sending an army because they didn't know how to provide it with food, and the French diplomat that asked Napoleon's permission, the French diplomat that asked Jefferson's permission for Napoleon to send the army, and the next question he asked was, "Would you help us send them provisions?" And Jefferson said, "Yes, of course, we'll be happy to." And there we were, answering that basic problem. So you could see how this led to the fatal clash between the blacks and the whites in Haiti.
Now, in a previous book, I think you described very well and gave me a lot of insights, A Disease in the Public Mind.
Yes.
And, of course, you went into the problem with Haiti and how that had such an impression on Jefferson.
Yes. And also on the South as a whole, though. That's the thing. I don't think we quite realize how I took the trouble to read whenever there was news of a black unrest or any place in the South or something. I found newspapers and I read editorials again and again and again saying we must not allow this to become a race war. And the climax of this fear came when John Brown staged his invasion of the South, with an attack on Harper's Ferry. John Brown had maps of the South in which each county and every county where blacks outnumbered whites, he had circled that county. And this was evidence that Brown thought that this was the place where he could really get a race war going. And when Robert E. Lee read these letters, and he realized that they were, or read other letters rather that Brown had in his portmanteau, his suitcase. When he read those letters, that was when his loyalty to the Union really pretty much dissolved, and the fact that he was turned away after 30 years of devoted service to the Union was a sign of how deeply this fear sank into the hearts of Southerners of all ages and reputations.
Now, to some extent, back in that time, my understanding is that a lot of people saw Robert E. Lee closely connected with the legacy of Washington because of the family contacts.
Yes. See, there's another interesting sort of reverse connection, you might say. He was married to Washington's daughter. She was an adopted granddaughter. I mean, but that only made Lee more aware of what Washington stood for compared to other politicians throughout his lifetime.
Now, one thing I have to ask, a lot of historians, they make the division between Hamilton and Jefferson, but you're focusing more on Washington and Jefferson. And why do you do that?
Well, I think historians like to find something new, and that's what I've always tried to do in all my books. And this is a subject that just hasn't been explored to any great extent. And I think really I have made a very convincing case for the fact that it was a real antagonism, a real dislike between these two men, and it also extends, Mike, to something else. Jefferson had very little regard for the U.S. Constitution. When he read it, he wrote a letter to John Adams, who was his ambassador to England, and Jefferson was ambassador to France. He was not involved in creating the Constitution in any way. Jefferson wasn't, and he said he was shocked. There were things in it which he couldn't believe anybody would ever recommend, particularly this strong presidency. I'm paraphrasing now. He said, as they see it, the president is a what he called it, a poor edition of a Polish king. Now, the key idea of a Polish king was he was selected by other nobles, but then he served for life. And that was what Jefferson predicted the president would do, and he hated it right away. And he was definitely opposed. And he also felt that there was the loyalty of everybody in the country should be based on, number one, the loyalty to their state, and then some degree of loyalty to the federal government. When Hamilton founded the Bank of the United States, Jefferson was appalled. There was no permission for that in the Constitution, no explicit permission. But Hamilton argued there were implied powers in the Constitution, and Washington agreed with him, and that enabled them to do very good things for the prosperity of the country. But Jefferson was in such a rage over this that when he found out that the Bank of the United States, which was operating out of Philadelphia, was going to open a branch bank in Virginia, he wrote this incredibly wild letter to his closest friend, James Madison, and he said that any Virginian who does business with this bank should be arrested, tried for treason, and executed. Can you imagine? It's one of the most staggering things I've ever heard any of the founding fathers say, but I have it, in black and white in my notes, and so that's the intensity of the feeling of alienation that Jefferson felt towards Washington's respect for, and but you have to say more, almost an admiration for the Constitution. James Madison, who when he was sort of a partner of Washington's while they were putting the Constitution together, there's a wonderful quote. He says, "No one signed the Constitution with more enthusiasm than General Washington." And when Jefferson read it, I guess you could say no one was more disgusted by the Constitution, among the founding fathers anyway, than Thomas Jefferson. So there are these symptoms of trouble are building all through the lives of the last years of the lives of Washington, and another climax was reached when Congress, because there was a threat of war with France, had passed two laws, the Alien and Sedition Acts. And the Alien Act enabled the president to deport any alien there were about 25,000 French refugees in the country, and anyone who was suspected of siding with the French revolutionists who wanted to turn the America into a satellite, the president could get rid of them, send them back to France. And the Sedition Act made it a crime to criticize the president if you couldn't prove your case. Jefferson was so out. Again, Washington thought these were war measures. He supported them, but only if while there was a real threat of a war. We were putting together an army that really looked like the French were going to invade us when these acts were passed. And Jefferson was so infuriated, and again he went into a wild frenzy, and he wrote a letter to the Kentucky legislature in which he urged them to announce that they were going to intervene between the federal government and the people of Kentucky and make it clear that they don't have to obey these laws, and then he added a really fatal set of words. He said, "Yes, and I would even say that scission," this was his word for secession, SCISSION, scission would be permitted. And there he was saying, no less a man than Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, saw secession as a legitimate goal of a state. This was, I think, you might say, the red button that no statesman should have ever have pressed in the situation toward which the United States was moving.
We look forward to hearing you on October 14th at the 3 West Club.
I hope we'll have a really vigorous discussion, because you've got a great group of members there, Mike, and they really know the subject, and I think we may argue a little, but
yeah, but I think it'll be a healthy argument.
We're all friends.
Right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for being on the show.
You're quite welcome. Right.